Ladies and gentlemen, people often say, men are shallow, like a deep well, but women are complex, like a treasure chest. Perhaps this explains why when a woman cheats, it's not easily hidden. Unlike men, women often cheat because they are emotionally involved, leading them to wear their emotions on their sleeves. Tonight, here on Emily, we bring you a short story exploring infidelity in marriage. Settle in, and I hope you find a moment of reflection in this tale. It was a chilly autumn afternoon in a small New England town. Kate stood by the door of her home, rubbing her arms to fend off the biting cold, though it was the emptiness inside that left her feeling truly frozen. The weak sunlight barely cast enough warmth to lift the gloom that hung over her life. "Mark, are you coming home for dinner tonight?" Kate tried to keep her voice steady as she called her husband. On the other end of the line, Mark's voice was distant. "I have to work late again, Kate. Don't wait up for me." Kate sighed quietly, hiding her disappointment. She couldn't even count how many times this had happened. Lately, Mark was either too busy or found other excuses not to come home early. It felt like their marriage was just going through the motions. From the outside, they appeared to have a peaceful life, but underneath, something had shifted, and the change was palpable. Looking back on the early days of their marriage, Kate remembered how different Mark used to be. He was attentive, caring, and always made time for her, even in the little things. But now an invisible wall had grown between them, and she felt like she was living with a stranger. Their 6-year-old son, Ryan, was playing with his toy cars on the living room floor. He looked up with a sad expression. "Mom, is Dad not coming home for dinner again?" Kate forced a smile and ruffled Ryan's hair. "No, honey. Daddy's busy, but we'll eat together, and he'll eat when he gets home later. Okay?" But deep down, Kate wasn't just trying to reassure Ryan. She was also trying to convince herself that everything was still okay. That evening, after putting Ryan to bed, Kate found herself scrolling through old messages on her phone. Her finger hovered over a name she hadn't seen in years. Ethan. It had been over a month since they bumped into each other by chance at the hospital when she was taking Ryan for a checkup. Ethan had been Kate's high school sweetheart, and seeing him again after so many years had stirred up old emotions. Ethan looked as handsome as ever, with a sharp suit and the same confident smile that once melted her heart. "How have you been, Kate?" Ethan's message appeared on her screen just as she had been thinking of him. Kate hesitated for a moment, feeling a rush of excitement she hadn't felt in years. She quickly responded, "I've been fine, just the same old routine. How about you?" "I've been busy, but I've thought about you a lot. You ever wonder what might have been?" Ethan's reply came almost instantly, making Kate's heart race. As she stared at his message, memories of their past love flooded back. They had once been inseparable, but life had taken them down different paths. Ethan was like a breath of fresh air in her otherwise monotonous life. It was late by the time Mark finally came home. Kate didn't even bother to ask him about his day. They had drifted so far apart that conversations between them had become shallow and routine, lacking the warmth they once shared. In the days that followed, Ethan and Kate exchanged more messages. What started as innocent catch-up conversations slowly turned into something deeper. Ethan made her feel seen, heard, and appreciated, something Mark hadn't done in a long time. One afternoon while Mark was at work, Ethan sent a message that made Kate's pulse quicken. "Let's meet. I'm in town, and I'd love to see you," he wrote. Kate stared at her phone for a long moment, feeling torn between guilt and desire. But before she could stop herself, she typed back, "Okay." They agreed to meet at a quiet cafe in town. When Kate arrived, Ethan was already there waiting for her with that same charming smile she remembered so well. He looked perfect, like he had just stepped out of a magazine, so different from Mark, who always seemed tired and worn out from work. They sat and talked for hours, reminiscing about the past, laughing, and sharing things that Kate hadn't been able to tell Mark in years. Being with Ethan felt like a release from the suffocating reality of her marriage. As the days passed, Kate found herself meeting Ethan more often. What began as innocent reunions quickly turned into something more. With every meeting, the lines blurred between friendship and something much more dangerous. One evening after spending the afternoon with Ethan, Kate returned home to find Ryan playing on the floor as usual, while Mark sat in front of the TV, barely acknowledging her presence. She felt an overwhelming sense of sadness. The life she once thought she wanted was now a burden she couldn't bear. Mark had become so distant, both emotionally and physically. He was no longer the man who cared for her, who showed her love. Instead, he seemed like a shadow of the man she married. She longed for the excitement and passion that Ethan brought into her life, a life that had grown dull and predictable with Mark. As time went on, Kate's relationship with Ethan deepened. She began to lie to Mark more frequently, using Ryan's doctor's appointments or errands as excuses to meet Ethan. She started dressing differently, paying more attention to her appearance whenever she knew she would see him. What once felt like harmless fun was quickly spiraling into a full-blown affair. But secrets have a way of surfacing. One evening, after months of deception, Kate sat at the dinner table with Mark, her heart heavy with the weight of her lies. She knew she couldn't continue living this way, trapped between two lives. "Mark," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper, "there's something I need to tell you." Mark looked up from his plate, his expression weary but curious. "What is it, Kate?" She hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. The truth was too painful to speak, yet she knew it had to come out. But before she could say another word, Mark's phone buzzed on the table. It was a message, one that would change everything. Mark glanced at the buzzing phone, and as he unlocked the screen, his face drained of color. The message he saw wasn't just a work notification. It was a series of pictures sent by an unknown number. The images were of Kate and Ethan, caught in intimate moments together. "Kate," he said, his voice low and dangerous, his eyes fixed on the phone screen. "What the hell is this?" Kate froze, her worst fear coming true. Her secret was out, laid bare in the most brutal way possible. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Mark's eyes burned with anger and betrayal as he held up the phone for her to see. "You've been seeing him," Mark growled. "How long has this been going on? Were you ever going to tell me?" Tears welled up in Kate's eyes as she stammered, "Mark, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." "How long, Kate?" Mark interrupted, his voice rising. "How long have you been lying to me?" Kate looked down, guilt overwhelming her. "A few months," she whispered, barely able to meet his gaze. Mark clenched his fists, trying to contain the anger boiling inside him. "A few months," he repeated, shaking his head. "I've been working my ass off, trying to support this family, and all the while you were sneaking around with him." "I didn't want it to happen like this," Kate pleaded, her voice cracking. "I wasn't happy, Mark. We'd been drifting apart for so long, and I felt so alone." Mark stared at her, his face a mixture of disbelief and hurt. "So your solution was to run to him? To cheat on me?" Kate tried to step closer, reaching out for him, but Mark pulled away. "Mark, I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix this, but I want to. Please, just let's talk about this. We can work through it." Mark shook his head slowly, his eyes cold and distant. "There's nothing to fix, Kate. You made your choice." With that, he turned and walked toward the door. Kate's heart sank as she realized the weight of what she had done. She had torn apart their marriage, and now there was no way to go back. In the days that followed, the tension in their home became unbearable. Mark had moved out, leaving Kate and Ryan alone in the house. The guilt gnawed at Kate, knowing she had destroyed her family. Every day she woke up to the suffocating reality that she had lost everything that mattered. Ethan, sensing the turmoil Kate was going through, reached out to her. He was persuasive, telling her that they could be together now, that everything was out in the open. But something inside Kate had changed. The excitement she once felt with Ethan was now tainted with regret. She realized that her relationship with him wasn't built on love. It was built on her own desperation to escape the pain of her failing marriage. One evening, Kate agreed to meet Ethan one last time, hoping to bring closure to the mess she had created. They met at the same cafe where their affair had begun. Ethan greeted her with his usual charming smile, but this time, Kate didn't feel the same pull toward him. Instead, she felt only sadness and emptiness. "Ethan," Kate began, her voice soft but firm. "This has to end. I can't keep doing this. I've hurt too many people, and I need to make things right with my family." Ethan's smile faltered. "Kate, you don't have to go back to him. We can be happy together." But Kate shook her head. "I can't. What we had was wrong. I was looking for a way out, but this isn't it." Ethan's face hardened, but he didn't argue. He simply nodded, realizing that Kate had made up her mind. As she stood up to leave, Kate felt a sense of finality wash over her. She had made many mistakes, but now she needed to face the consequences and rebuild her life. In the months that followed, Kate focused on mending the damage she had done. It wasn't easy. Mark was still hurt, and while he remained civil for Ryan's sake, their relationship was broken. They went through the motions of co-parenting, but the love that once held them together was gone. Kate sought counseling, both for herself and for Ryan, who was struggling to understand why his father no longer lived at home. She poured her energy into being a better mother, trying to regain some sense of stability for her son. As for Mark, he eventually moved on, though the scars of betrayal remained. He found solace in his work and began to rebuild his life, piece by piece. There were moments when he thought about what could have been, but in the end he knew there was no going back. Kate too learned to live with the choices she had made. The affair with Ethan had cost her everything, but in the end, it forced her to confront the truth about herself and her marriage. She realized that happiness couldn't be found in the arms of another person. It had to come from within. The road to healing was long and difficult, but Kate knew that she had to keep moving forward. She would never forget the mistakes she had made, but she also knew that life, like love, was about second chances. And though things would never be the same, Kate was determined to find peace, if not with Mark, then with herself. And so, dear listeners, we come to the end of our story. A tale of love, betrayal, and the difficult path to redemption. Sometimes the choices we make lead us down dark roads, but there's always a way back, if we're willing to face the truth. Thank you for joining us tonight on M. Miley. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, and we'll see you next time with another story.